everybody, today I'm going to read a biography. It's called The Story of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. A trailblazer is born. When Joan Ruth Bader came into the world on March 15, 1933, she seemed born to be a fighter. She kicked so much as a baby that her big sister Marilyn called her Kiki. Everyone else called her Ruth. Ruth was a curious child who loved to read. Among her favorites was Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, about a smart, confident girl named Jo and her sisters. Tales of strong girls surely inspired Ruth. Maybe Ruth always knew she had an important cause to fight for. Over the course of her life, she was a trailblazer in American history. When she grew up, Ruth became the second woman ever to sit on the Supreme Court of the United States, the highest court that makes decisions for the whole country. Ruth helped change many laws to make the United States more fair for women. As a leader, lawyer, and judge, she fought for justice and equal rights for all people. Every day, Ruth worked hard to improve the world we live in. What changes did she make? And what inspired her to make them? Let's go on a journey back in time to find out. Ruth was born in 1933 in Brooklyn, New York. At that time, boys could grow up to be doctors, lawyers, writers, or anything else they wanted to be, but girls were expected to become wives and mothers. Women who worked outside the home had few options for jobs. Careers like being a nurse, teacher, or secretary were thought of as fitting for women. Most of the other jobs were off limits. I can't believe that. I can't imagine the world without some female doctors or female lawyers or female veterinarians. Women who did have jobs were paid much less than men who were doing the same work. That wasn't the only unfair thing. Even though the first presidential election in the United States took place in 1789, women weren't allowed to vote until 1920. That's more than 130 years later. Jump in the think tank. How would you feel if someone thought you were bad luck because of your religion? During this time, there was also a lot of anti-Semitism in the world. Anti-Semitism is the hatred or unfair treatment of Jewish people. Because Ruth's family was Jewish, they experienced anti-Semitism often. Once on a road trip from New York to Pennsylvania, Ruth and her family drove past a sign that read, "No dogs or Jews allowed." Some children on Ruth's street wouldn't invite Jewish kids like Ruth over to their house. The mothers told them Jewish people brought bad luck. So America's first college, like Harvard, which was founded in 1636, only allowed men. Harvard didn't allow female students until 1975. I know 2020 seems like, now it's 2020. 1975 seems like a long time ago, but that wasn't that long ago. As terrible as that was, anti-Semitism was much worse in Europe, where Ruth's family was from. Ruth's parents and grandparents were immigrants who came to the United States, searching for a safe place to live and work. By 1941, when Ruth was 8 years old, things in Europe had gotten so horrible that a war broke out. American soldiers were sent overseas to join the fighting in World War II against Adolf Hitler, the evil leader of the Nazis in Germany, and Germany's partners, Japan and Italy. After 4 long years, on May 8, 1945, Ruth watched as all of New York City danced in the streets to celebrate the victory of America and its partners in the end of the war. So here's a timeline. So when things happened, Ruth was born in 1933. Then her older sister Marilyn passed away only a year later. In 1938, she enters kindergarten and World War II begins. Then America declares war on Germany. And then 4 years later, World War II ends. Life was better after the war, but some things hadn't changed. There was still anti-Semitism, and women continued to be treated unfairly. Ruth's mother, however, believed girls could and should study and work hard like boys. This early encouragement from her mother inspired her. Ruth would soon find that studying and working hard could change her life. Growing up in Brooklyn. Joan Ruth Bader started kindergarten in 1938. There were so many other kids in her class named Joan that she went by her middle name, Ruth, instead. Ruth loved to read. Her mother, Celia, took her to the public library every Friday after school. Handwriting was harder for Ruth. She was left-handed, and at the time, teachers made all children write with their right hands. Could you believe that? This frustrated Ruth to the point of tears. She even got a D in handwriting. After that, she vowed to write only with her left hand. From a very young age, Ruth fought against even the smallest injustice. Reading is the key that opens doors to many good things in life. Reading shaped my dreams and more. Reading helped me make my dreams come true. I agree with Ruth. I love to read, and I believe that it does help shape your dreams. Ruth also didn't think it was fair that girls had to take sewing and cooking while boys got to take woodshop. She wished she could have as many choices and opportunities as the boys had at school. Jump in think tank. Why do you think certain classes were assigned to boys and other classes to girls? Are there still things that are different for girls and boys today? So I think different classes were offered because back then women were expected to stay home and raise babies and cook and clean, so they took classes that taught them how to do all those things, whereas boys got to take classes that would help them in their future positions. Despite her D in handwriting, Ruth was always good with words. She wrote for her middle school newspaper. She was such a strong student that she was even chosen to speak at a high school graduation. Sadly, her mother became very ill with a disease called cancer and died just before Ruth graduated. So Ruth didn't go to her graduation. She stayed home with her father instead. Blazing into higher education. Ruth knew that her mother had wanted her to attend college. So just a few months after her mother's death in 1950, Ruth started at Cornell University. She was such a strong student that Cornell offered her a scholarship, which means they gave her money to help her pay for school. At Cornell, Ruth's life changed forever. She met a professor named Robert E. Cushman, who taught her about the country's founding document, the Constitution of the United States. He taught her that the law could help make the world a better place. Ruth also met Marty Ginsburg during her first year in college. He was 1 year ahead of her in school. Ruth remembered that he was the first man interested in her for her intelligence. They became fast friends and then dated. 4 years later, Ruth and Marty got married. Ruth changed her name to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's sometimes called RBG for short. That same year, Ruth graduated from Cornell at the top of her class with honors. In fact, she was such an incredible student that she was accepted to Harvard Law School in Massachusetts, one of the best law schools in the country. RBG was going to become a lawyer. So in 4 years, she started college, and then she graduated. A big surprise. Ruth was excited to begin Harvard Law School. Her husband Marty had already completed his first year there. Then they got the hard news. A war had broken out in the country of Korea. America needed more soldiers to help fight. So in 1954, Marty had to take a break from law school to join the Army. The Army needed Marty to go to Oklahoma, so he and Ruth moved across the country. Ruth looked for a job there, but most companies would not hire women for the jobs she wanted. This was one form of discrimination, or unfair treatment of a certain group of people. In this case, Ruth was treated unfairly because she was a woman. Finally, Ruth found a job. Soon after, she became pregnant with her first child. When her company discovered she was pregnant, they forced her to take a lower position that paid less money. Can you believe that? Could you imagine if companies did that now? Back on track at Harvard. Ruth and Marty's first child, Jane, was born in 1955. A year after that, Ruth finally got to go to Harvard Law School. In her class, there were more than 500 men and only 9 women. One of the heads of the law school invited the 9 female students to dinner. He asked each of them, "Why are you here, taking the place of a man?" All the women had grades and intelligence equal to their male classmates. Yet he wanted these women to prove or justify why they were as important as the male students. Ruth later learned he had asked for their stories and goals so he could share them with those who doubted that women deserved to be at Harvard Law. Ruth managed to balance being a new mom and a law student at the same time, but it wasn't easy. Oh my gosh, I can't imagine how hard that was. Still, she was a born fighter. She studied hard and got excellent grades, even better grades than Marty. She was chosen to be on the Harvard Law Review, a special law newspaper that only accepts top students. If someone asked you to justify your right to learn, how would you answer? That is a great question. I would tell them that learning is so important because it gives you the ideas and options to think about what you want to be when you grow up. And if people weren't given the option to learn to read and write and just learn things in general, then we wouldn't have doctors that are out there saving people's lives. In 1958, during his final year of law school, Marty became very sick with cancer. Now, Ruth wasn't only going to law school and taking care of her daughter, she was also caring for her ill husband and helping him with his schoolwork, in addition to her own. Luckily, Marty got well. After he graduated, he was offered a job as a lawyer. In New York City, Ruth changed law schools to keep the family together. My mother told me 2 things constantly. One was to be a lady, and the other was to be independent. The study of law was unusual for a woman of my generation. In 1959, Ruth earned her law degree from Columbia Law School in New York City. She even tied with another classmate for first in her place. She was chosen to be on the Columbia Law Review too, making her the first woman to be both on Harvard Law Review and Columbia Law Review. Despite how hard law school was made for women, Ruth came out on top. She didn't give up her dream of being a lawyer because she was living in a man's world. Instead, she chose to change the world. The unemployable RBG. Even though Ruth was one of the best students at 2 of the top law schools in the country, it was still almost impossible for her to find a job. Most employers didn't want to hire a woman, and they especially didn't want to hire mothers. One of the professors from Columbia Law School, Gerald Gunther, called every judge in town to tell him about Ruth, but no one would hire a woman with a 4-year-old daughter. Her grades were excellent, but judges worried she'd be too busy taking care of her child to work hard. Finally, Professor Gunther found someone to give Ruth a chance. He reached out to Judge Edmund Palmieri and begged him to hire Ruth as a clerk. In fact, Professor Gunther vowed to never send another Columbia student to clerk for Judge Palmieri if he didn't hire her. The judge agreed to give Ruth the job, but Professor Gunther had to promise if she didn't work out, he would find the judge a male clerk. Professor Gunther agreed. Thankfully, he never needed to replace Ruth. She worked hard for the judge and did such a great job that she kept the position for 2 years. During that time, she learned just how important a judge's decision can be. Abroad in Sweden. After working for Judge Palmieri, Ruth traveled to Sweden in 1962 to research how courts worked in other countries. She learned Swedish the previous year. Later, she and a Swedish judge wrote a book about her work there. She even translated Sweden's judicial code or laws of the land into English. This woman is amazing. Ruth was inspired by how well women were treated in Sweden. She learned that Swedish women made up 20 to 25% of law students. I try to teach through my opinions, through my speeches, how wrong it is to judge people on the basis of what they look like, the color of their skin, whether they're men or women. One female judge she met in Sweden was 8 months pregnant and was allowed to keep working as long as she wanted. Ruth's time in Sweden showed her it's possible for women to have equal rights given in the United States, the wheels in her head began to turn. Professor Ginsburg. After her work studying Swedish law, Ruth got a job as a law professor at Rutgers University in New Jersey. Finally, Ruth was getting opportunities that only men had gotten for hundreds of years. Ruth knew that Rutgers was paying her less money than male professors doing the same job, but she also knew she couldn't say no to the offer. The university tried to justify its actions, saying she was paid less because her husband had a job too. Ruth did not think that was fair. When Ruth started teaching at Rutgers in 1963, she was one of only 20 female law professors in the whole country. While teaching there, she became pregnant with her second child. Once again, Ruth tried to hide her pregnancy for fear of being fired. Standing up for yourself like Ruth is so important, but it can also be a little scary. Sometimes it's easier to stay quiet when unfair things happen. But there are reasons you need to take a stand for yourself, even if you think it's scary. In 1965, she and Marty welcomed their son, James, to the world. In 1971, a group of female professors, including Ruth, filed a federal lawsuit against Rutgers for discriminating against women. They took the university to court, and they won. Rutgers was told it had to change the amounts it paid to women to match the amounts it paid men for the same work. Things were starting to change for the better. Isn't that fantastic? She's making such a big difference. An organization that fights for human rights of all kinds was hearing from many women and girls who were being treated unfairly. For example, an employee at a school was told to leave work without getting paid while she was pregnant. A female worker at her company was told she couldn't have health insurance because it was only for men. Also, a summer engineering program for 6th graders only allowed boys to sign up. At ACLU, the ACLU asked Ruth to argue these cases in court for them because she was such a great lawyer. She proudly fought for these women and girls, and she won! Ruth helped lead the women's rights and social justice movements in America. In 1971, Rutgers Law School had the second highest number of female students in the country. Ruth was inspiring other women to become lawyers too. Inside the courtroom. By 1972, the ACLU had created the Women's Rights Project. Its goal was to fight against gender discrimination, or unfair treatment of people because they are male or female. Ruth helped create and direct this project. In her role at ACLU, Ruth argued 6 cases before the Supreme Court of the United States, and she won 5 of them. One case was about a man whose mother was sick, and if he had been a woman, the government would have given him money to help take care of his mother. But because he was a man, the law said he was on his own. Ruth argued that this discrimination against him because he was a male was unfair, and she won. With this case, she clearly showed that gender discrimination hurts men too. She knew that would matter to the panels of all male judges. She also knew it would help her argue gender discrimination cases for women later on. At the same time, Ruth became a professor at Columbia Law School. She was the first woman to be hired with tenure there, which meant she could work there for as long as she wanted. She also helped write the first legal textbook on gender discrimination. U.S. District Courts of Appeals. Ruth was such a brave and successful lawyer that in 1980, President Jimmy Carter picked her to be the judge on the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. The judges on this court heard cases that had already received a decision at the state level but were being appealed. This means people were trying to get the judges to change their decision. Now Ruth wasn't just a lawyer, she was a judge. Judges do not say if they belong to a particular political party. However, many judges are more conservative in their opinions, and others are more liberal. Ruth was more liberal. That means she often believed in more help and control from the United States government. Conservatives feel that individual state governments should have more power to make decisions. During her time on the Court of Appeals, Ruth learned to work with other judges who had different opinions than hers. For example, Judge Antonin Scalia was much more conservative than Ruth, but they became great friends. They even performed in an opera together. As a judge, Ruth helped women get more equal pay and gender equality. When she heard discrimination cases, she also learned that an important part of her job was expressing dissent, or an opposing opinion. The Supreme Court of the United States is the highest court in the nation. Sometimes a legal case is very important and controversial, meaning people have very different opinions on how it should be decided. When this happens, the case can move beyond the state court system and be dedicated at the national level. It would then be argued in front of the 9 justices of the Supreme Court who will rule the final decision. In March 1993, one of those 9 justice seats opened up, and President Bill Clinton needed someone to fill in. He got advice from Justice Antonin Scalia, who was then serving on the Supreme Court. President Clinton asked Justice to help him decide between 2 men. Justice told him to choose Ruth Bader Ginsburg instead. President Clinton interviewed Ruth at the White House. He was so impressed by her that he asked her to join the Supreme Court. Ruth was no longer simply Kiki or RBG. She was now Justice Ginsburg. She became the second woman ever to sit on the Supreme Court, and she was the first Jewish woman to take on this role. After Ruth, 2 other women joined her on the Supreme Court, Justice Sonia Sotomayor and Justice Elena Kagan. There were many cases where Ruth's dissent, meaning she strongly disagreed with the majority ruling of the other justices on the Supreme Court. When Ruth read a dissent, she wore a special collar around the neck of her robe. She also had special collars for when she agreed with the court. Some issues argued in front of the Supreme Court included a woman's right to make decisions about her own health care and work. One famous case involved a woman named Lily Ledbetter. She was suing her employer for paying her less because she was a female. Lily lost her case. The court ruled 5-4, saying she waited too long to report that she was being underpaid, and Ruth felt that was absurd. In her dissent, she pointed out that women don't usually know they are being paid less, so they can't be expected to report it until they find it out. After President Barack Obama took office in 2009, the first thing he signed into law was the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. Now, what happened to Lilly can't happen to anyone. Ruth helped inspire and write that law. In 1999, Ruth found out she had cancer. She continued working through 3 rounds of cancer treatments. She even went to court the day after Marty died to read a summary of a decision she had made as Supreme Court Justice. She knew that's what Marty would have wanted her to do. Recently, Ruth became sick again. For the first time, she missed a day on the bench in court. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was the most senior liberal judge on the Supreme Court. True to her trailblazing nature, Ruth kept on fighting for women's rights and human rights in her role as a Supreme Court Justice of the United States until the very end. Sadly, on September 18, 2020, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away after a long battle with cancer. The nation mourned the loss of RBG, a leader and champion for justice. So that was just last month that she passed away. Isn't that an amazing story? I mean, she has done so much for women's rights and for women to be treated equally in our country that without her, maybe women would still be forced to stay home and cook and clean and take care of babies. That's why it's so important to pay attention in school for everyone so that you can find your passion and turn that passion into a career, and maybe you'll change the world for somebody else. All right, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.